knew who they were, whether or not they knew if they were removable or if they had an order of removal or not. And this has led to a changing landscape on the ground. We have ICE officers who have never done this before. You have people who've been on the force for 20 years who have never done street enforcement. They've never done traffic stops. And what I can say from what's coming out and what you can see on the media is that ICE agents are unqualified, undisciplined, and untrained for this type of tactic, right? And that's why we're seeing so much danger on the ground. So with that, also comes the consequence that not only the people that are undocumented or maybe have been, ordered to be removed and have not left are getting swept out by ICE. We see more and more lawful citizens or lawful immigrants being swept up by ICE. And our Department of Homeland Security has suggested that everybody, including U.S. citizens, should be walking around day after day with proof of their lawful ability to be in the United States present. That's not something that's required by law, but that is something that Christy Noem got on Twitter and said you should be doing. So we're going to talk about what that means for us later. But the practical takeaway is that this is like a fluid situation and things are not the same as they were even a year ago today. So let's start off talking about some key terms that we're going to be using. It's important to have these terms down because as we move through the slides, I'm going to be using these terms. So it's very important that all of us are on the same page with what they mean so that we can all have like an informed understanding of what we're doing moving forward. The first term is administrative. And administrative means anything that's done by an agency of the federal government. And when you're talking about administrative actions, you're talking about stuff that's done by the executive branch, usually, of the government. They are USCIS, ICE, Customs and Border Protection. Those are all administrative agencies. And the Department of Homeland Security as well. And when we talk about administrative, we're talking about something that's done by them. And then and they have certain powers, and they only have certain powers, and those powers are either given to them by statute or by regulation. And then we're going to talk about judicial. Judicial means court. Like literally, if you hear judicial, you should think about the court, right? It's the judge. And it could be a federal court, which in this area is going to be the Eastern District of Michigan or the Sixth Circuit, or it's going to be a state court, which in this area is going to be Oakland County Circuit Court or Southfield District Court. Those are all courts. Those are all judicial things. So when we talk about judicial, just think court, really. And then we're going to talk about jurisdiction. And jurisdiction becomes very important later when we talk about who ICE can detain. But jurisdiction really means the power of either a court or an agency to handle a matter or take possession, control, or custody of a person or thing. So that's what jurisdiction means. It means this agency or this person or this group has the authority to take over or control a situation or take custody or control of a person or a thing. And then we're going to talk about warrants, and we're going to talk about them in two contexts. We're going to talk about an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. But a warrant is like a piece of paper that gives you authority, gives somebody or an agency authority to do something or to take something or to arrest somebody or to search a home. So when we talk about warrants, that's what it is. It's a document either from an administrative agency or a court that gives law enforcement personnel power to do something or take possession of something. So let's talk about what law enforcement is in Michigan. It's important to know who's on the scene at any given circumstance because then you know what's going on. If you look on from your guys' side, it's the left side. It's backwards on mine every time. I have to turn around and look every time. But if you look on the left side, those are Michigan state badges. Those are law enforcement agencies within the state of Michigan. Michigan State Police, there's the silver one's a Detroit Police Department badge. Most police department badges look like that. And then the gold one is a state trooper badge. When we talk about law enforcement in Michigan, we're talking about Michigan law enforcement that has the ability to enforce Michigan's criminal code or their traffic violations. Most of the times you're seeing these people when you get pulled over because you were going too fast on 696 because we were late for our work or our kids' soccer game. That's when you're going to see these. And then on the other side of the screen, you're going to see all of the federal agencies. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Marshals, ICE, and Customs and Border Patrol. Those are badges of the federal government. Those are federal agency badges. They're law enforcement agencies with the federal government. And they're usually the ones, except for the U.S. Marshals, they're usually the ones enforcing immigration law exclusively. Or when you come in, maybe they're inspecting your bags at the border if it's Customs and Border Protection. The U.S. Marshals can arrest people for federal crimes, but they do some law enforcement. So one of the reasons why it's important to know who's on the scene is because if something goes wrong, we have to know who to hold accountable, right? We also have to know, like, if we're getting pulled over and you see red, white, and blue lights and you're in the background, that's probably going to be state or local law enforcement. We can probably kind of relax because we know we probably have a taillight out, or we skipped a stop sign, or we're speeding. But if we see just white and blue lights and we see one of these badges on the right side of the screen, we probably going to understand that that's going to be an immigration stop, and we might want to take a different posture with that, and it might cause us more problems. So with that framework in mind, let's talk about who can enforce law, who can enforce immigration in the United States. So generally, agencies with authority to enforce immigration law are going to be those federal agencies. They're going to be the badges that we talked about that were kind of on the right side of the screen: ICE, Customs and Border Protection, Department of Homeland Security, HSI, which is Homeland Security Investigations, which is a brand new thing, and U.S. Marshals sometimes come in and help. We've seen both of the most recent shootings that we've seen related to immigration roundup have happened from Customs and Border Protection doing traffic style stops looking for immigrants, and that's not usually what they do, and they're not trained for it. That's probably why we see that. So you could see any of these agencies out doing doing immigration enforcement inside the United States, and particularly in Michigan. And we'll talk about that on the next slide, why Michigan is so special when it comes to seeing those law enforcement agencies out. But those top agencies are usually the ones, the federal agencies, that can enforce immigration law. Generally speaking, local law enforcement cannot enforce immigration law. They have zero authority. Your Southfield police cannot enforce immigration law. They cannot go to your house, figure out whether you're documented or undocumented, and then take you into custody for ICE. They can't do that. It's not within their authority. Their authority is Michigan criminal law and Michigan traffic law exclusively. That's what they have the right to enforce exclusively. With one caveat, there are some law enforcement agencies that have a 27G agreement with ICE that allows them to do immigration enforcement to a certain respect. It's not a good agreement, and if your local government has one, Southfield does not, by the way. Oh, Farmington Hills, yeah. I don't know why I keep saying Southfield. Farmington Hills does not have one at all. They don't. There's only like 6 places in Michigan that actually have one. Most of them are counties. Most of them are like out county on the west side of the state, where, we're probably not living anyways, because it's a lot colder and they get a lot more snow than we do here. But like most of them do not. The one that around here that does is going to be Taylor. Taylor has one. It's around here. Is closer to my house than your house, but it's the closest one out here. If they have that agreement, then they will engage in questioning for law enforcement, and they may take you into custody. But a lot of municipalities don't do it because the municipality has to bear all of the cost of it, and our municipalities don't have enough tax money to go around, so they're not trying to do that. So these are when we're talking about like who's enforcing immigration. ICE, CBP, HSI, USCIS, generally not the state police, your local police department, or the state troopers. One thing that's unique about Michigan is that Michigan has all these beautiful Great Lakes, right? We always hear about our Great Lakes. They go all the way around Michigan. We like to go swimming in them in the summer, except for Lake Michigan because it's always cold year round. We go boating, canoeing, everything in these lakes, right? Every single one of them is connected to the other one, meaning you can go from one to the next, all the way around to Ohio. We don't go to Ohio because we don't like it there, but you could, if you wanted to, go from Lake Michigan all the way to Lake Erie and to Ohio. The other thing that's unique about them is half of them touch Canada. That's interesting because there's a law that says that any land mass that is within 100 nautical miles or air miles of a international waterway is considered a border. It is part of the border. Because all of the Great Lakes intertwine and half of them touch Canada, every single Great Lake is considered an international waterway. And because of the way that nautical miles and air miles are calculated, because they're not the same miles that we drive, they're calculated completely differently. The entire land of the state of Michigan is considered an international border. There's not 1 square inch of Michigan land that is not considered an international border. Why does that matter? That matters because that means CBP has jurisdiction to inspect things and people across the state of Michigan. They don't have to be at the Windsor Tunnel or the Mackinac Bridge or that new Gordie Howe Bridge that Trump said maybe he's not opening, or the airport. They can be literally anywhere in the state of Michigan. And I can tell you 2 years ago, I took pictures of CBP on 275 and 696 interchange, pulling people over. It happens. They're not supposed to engage in traffic enforcement, but if they find a reason to believe that there's some kind of border crime happening, which could be just undocumented people, they can engage in traffic enforcement. So it makes our situation a little bit more precarious here in Michigan when we're talking about CBP. The other thing is every once in a while, local municipalities will engage with CBP to do traffic enforcement. The city of Detroit had a long-standing agreement that would allow CBP to pull you over for running stop signs over there by the tunnel. Like, like off of Jefferson over there where the tunnel is, you would see CBP handing out traffic citations. That's a problem, because if they're handing out a traffic citation, that means they know who's in the car. They can look and see. They can try to determine whether that person might be a migrant or not, and then that causes them like a more sort of tenuous situation. So that's just something to keep in mind, that Michigan is unique, and you might see CBP out in more places than you would see ICE. It's legal, yeah. So let's talk about who ICE can lawfully detain, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this. The fancy term for who ICE can detain is they have jurisdiction over them, right? So obviously, ICE can detain anybody who is without lawful immigration status. And we call those people sometimes undocumented people. We often talk about undocumented people as if they're the people that came across usually the southern border, but they do come across the northern border sometimes. But usually the southern border without paperwork, they don't stop at the border, they're not inspected, they literally just walk across the land border, and then they're here. Those people are undocumented people. Another way to think about people without lawful permanent statuses is people who've come over here with a valid visa, but their visa expired and they didn't leave. You were here lawfully, but once your visa expired, you no longer have lawful status. You can be detained by ICE. If you are here and you overstayed and you applied for new status and you have a receipt, and you might even have a work permit saying that you've applied for new status, or maybe you've even applied for asylum here, or and you have a work permit, but you haven't actually been granted that status yet, you are also without lawful status. Having that work permit and having a receipt for an application for immigration does not grant you lawful status here. That is a misconception that a lot of people don't understand. The other people that can be detained lawfully by ICE are green card holders or refugees or any visa holder that has had a prior criminal conviction. If you are a green card holder and you've been convicted of any crime, ICE can take custody of you. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be deported. A judge will ultimately decide whether or not you're deportable or removable from the United States based on that offense. But because you have that offense, they can take you into custody. And because Trump has said that they have to arrest 3,000 people a day, they're taking everybody into custody that they can. This is why we see on the news that you have this guy who's like a veteran of the Iraqi war, and he's been here 25 years, and he's got a green card, but he had like a drunk driving infraction when he was 18, which was like 40 years ago or something, and now he's being picked up by ICE because they have jurisdiction to take custody of people, even with lawful status, if they've had a prior criminal conviction. It doesn't have to be a felony. It doesn't have to be a big crime. It can be a small crime. Maybe you never went to jail for it. Maybe you never even did probation for it. Maybe it was 100 years ago, and maybe all of your family now are U.S. citizens, but you're not. You can still be picked up by ICE. And I think that that's something that a lot of people overlook, quite frankly. So let's talk about a recent Supreme Court decision. So I spoke a little bit at the very, very beginning about how ICE is engaging in these tactical assault style traffic public enforcement actions like SWAT teams or the military does. That's something that's brand new. It's something that used to be understood to be illegal. Before the Trump administration, what we would say is that if an ICE agent wanted to stop you and inquire about your immigration status, that they would have to have what's called a reasonably articulable suspicion, which is so fancy for saying that they have to have a reason that they can tell you why they thought you were not here with lawful status. Like when we talk about a traffic stop and somebody wants to search your car, that's what they have to have: probable cause or a reasonable suspicion that they can tell you about. They can articulate to you as to why they're stopping you. That used to be ICE. ICE decided to change their policy and allow them to confront anybody on the street that they deemed appeared to be an immigrant without lawful status here. And some of the policy memos that they put out said that they were going to stop people who were speaking in a non-English language, that they were going to stop people who had a non-American accent, that they were going to stop people that were visibly immigrants. So you're talking black and brown folks. They were going to stop people who had traditional immigrant jobs, for whatever that means. And these are all factors that they were going to use to determine whether or not they could lawfully stop somebody on the street. And they got sued over it because people are like, that's racial profiling. And for about 50 or 60 years now, we know that racial profiling for law enforcement purposes is unconstitutional. But what happened is a court said, yeah, we agree that's unconstitutional. They can't do that. They cannot stop somebody for being brown and speaking Spanish on the street. However, when the court stopped them from enforcing that policy, the Supreme Court issued an order putting a stop to that court's order, meaning they allowed the policy to go forward. So the Supreme Court has said, we're going to let this play out a little bit longer. So because the Supreme Court said that, that means ICE can stop you if you are speaking a foreign language, if you are visibly brown or black, if you are visibly working a job that they think is a primary immigrant job. So we're talking taxi drivers, Uber drivers, construction workers for Hispanic people, et cetera, and the list goes on of all these racist things that they're doing. The thing that's important to understand is that race can't be the only factor. So they can't just be like, oh, this guy looks like he's from Lebanon, so that we're going to stop him. They can't do that. It has to be a multitude of factors. The other thing that's important to understand is that just because they stop you and just because they detain you doesn't mean it's lawful. Sometimes we have to enforce our rights twice. We have to enforce them at the stop, and then we have to enforce them later, and we'll talk about what that looks like in a later slide. But they are allowed to use relevant factors, including what your national origin or racial makeup looks like, in order to stop you on the street. It's important to understand also, though, that this is changing. This is not a final order. This is something that's working its way through the court, so this could be updated. But the takeaway is that under this administration, anyone perceived as an immigrant by ICE may be at risk of arrest, but that does not mean that the arrest is lawful. So the next thing I want to talk about is public spaces versus private spaces and what that means. So a public space is generally anywhere that somebody from the street can walk into unobstructed. Grocery stores, restaurants, the mall, this masjid, those are all public spaces. Private spaces, think locked door, right? Your house, like parts of this masjid that people are not allowed to enter, like the imam's office. If you're at work and you work in an office building like we do, my office would not be a public space because everybody's not invited into it. The building itself might be public, but locked doors are not public. Break rooms where people might eat lunch, kitchens where people are cooking, food to be served in the restaurant, but the customers are not allowed to go in the kitchen. So that would be a private space. And why that matters is because ICE officers can walk into any public space without any warrant. They can just walk in. If people from the street can walk in, ICE officers can walk in unobstructed. One second. And then, but if you have a locked door or a private space, ICE cannot enter without a judicial warrant. Yeah. So her question is schools. So that's a tricky one, right? Schools are public schools. Private schools are private. So not everybody from if you have a private school, not everybody from the street can come in. They don't have business there in the private school. So they can't come in. However, what we do know is that public schools are heavily locked because of gun violence in the United States primarily. So schools have been specifically effective at keeping ICE out because of their locked door policy. Most schools will not allow ICE in without a judicial warrant because they're vetting every human being that comes through. So locked door means private space generally. So you can come into a public space. So for this masjid specifically, it's very important to understand where the private spaces are, where the public spaces are, and then have other people know why that information is, like, know that information also. So that if somebody needs to seek refuge in a private space, they kind of know where to go. And we'll talk about that in a little while. Yeah. So she's saying, what if there's a sign that says like no trespassing private space? I was telling my son as we came in here today that I think you guys should have a no trespassing sign out and a no trespassing sign in the parking lot, because the parking lot is owned by the masjid, making it private property. But when you don't declare it as a private space, it makes it a lot easier for people to come in. And what we have seen is that ICE has detained people in a parking lots of masjids. We are representing somebody who was picked up at the masjid in Melville on his way into Fajr in the parking lot with his son. So like I said, your rights are not self-actualizing. They don't exist. And sometimes like there's no foolproof answer, but having a no trespassing sign will go a long way to being able to have you tell ICE, like, you're not welcome here. This is a private place. You need to leave if you don't have a judicial warrant. It will also go a long way where if somebody is picked up by ICE here, for them to be able to make the argument that they were picked up without a judicial warrant in a private space and have them released. They just released 57 people from North Lake Correctional Facility 2 weeks ago because they were picked up by ICE in Michigan unlawfully without judicial warrants in private spaces. So there are things we can do to protect our rights and assert them later. Hang on, this brother had a question. That's a great question. So yes, typically speaking, when we think of a warrant, we think of something that's signed by a judge. We're going to talk about the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. So no, the legislator cannot issue a warrant, but ICE can under their own authority, which is why it has limited authority. That's why an ICE warrant has limited authority, because it's issued under their own authority that they've granted themselves, and they have limited authority. So that warrant itself has limited authority, and we will talk about that on the next slide. So his question is, can masjids declare themselves as private property or not? Yes and no. Because there are rules that have to be governed when you have a religious place of assembly. You have to follow certain rules. Also, inherently by the nature of a masjid, it is not a private space because we are not policing who comes in it every day. Having a security guard outside your door identifying when law enforcement is inappropriately entering can do a lot for you guys, and making that space more private from law enforcement. So there's a difference between making your place a truly private space and making your place a private property that becomes a quasi-private space, because now you have somebody bouncing people out of here, for lack of a better term. So he's asking, if you put a no trespassing sign, does it affect local law enforcement? Yes and no. So like local law enforcement cannot do police activity on private property or in a private parking lot in general anyways, unless they've been invited to do so, meaning somebody's called them here to do so. Like if you guys have a handicap spot out front and somebody is running late for Juma and they park in the handicap spot without a proper license for that, the police can't just come in and parole, like patrol around looking to give people parking tickets. But if the masjid calls and says, hey, come inside, we got people parking in the handicap, then they will do it. But if they're investigating a crime, local law enforcement can come to the masjid without an invitation to investigate a crime. But it's the same thing. They can't, local law enforcement cannot come into private spaces without a warrant. So if they come into the masjid, or they come to the masjid, like Farmington Hills Police or State Police, and like, hey, we want to talk to you guys. And you're like, you know what? Do you have a warrant? And they're like, no. And you could be like, okay, goodbye. Like literally, like that's how that goes. Are they hanging out? Just they're probably avoiding. I don't want to say we're live streaming, so I'm going to be nice how I say that. But if you find law enforcement in the first thing in the morning in your masjid, they're probably avoiding whatever other duties they're supposed to be doing. They're probably taking a break here and hanging out someplace where they're off the road and people can't see them. Quite frankly, they're probably not doing anything else. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about administrative versus judicial warrants. So this is very important because, like I said, an administrative warrant has certain powers that are very limited, and a judicial warrant has much broader powers. So if you look on the left side of your screen, that is an administrative warrant. That warrant usually at the top will say warrant for arrest of an alien. If it says that, you can guess that that is not going to be a court order. That is going to be something that's either signed by the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, or most likely USCIS, and is being implemented by ICE. That's going to have the name of a migrant on it. It's going to have the terms Department of Homeland Security on it, Department of USCIS. That's what it's going to say on it. So when you start looking at it, look at the top. If it says warrant for arrest of an alien, and it says Department of Homeland Security at the top, you know that's an administrative warrant. An administrative warrant does not allow ICE or any other administrative agency to come into a private space. What that does is that allows them to arrest a particular person who's named on that warrant in a public space, meaning outside, on the street, in a shopping mall, at the grocery store, somewhere public. They can only arrest them in public. It does not allow them to enter your home or any private spaces like your office, the masjid, the imam's office. If you guys have a school here, like if you have schools that has locked doors, it doesn't allow them to enter any of those places. It has to be in public, most likely on the street. If you see the one that's on the right-hand side, that is a judicial warrant. So when we look at warrants, we're going to start always from the top and go down. The first thing you're going to notice on a judicial warrant is it says court on it. It is 100% of the time going to say court. A judicial warrant will always say court. It might say United States District Court. It might say, Oakland County Circuit Court. It's going to say court on it. A judicial warrant allows ICE or other law enforcement agencies to enter private spaces and arrest somebody as long as the warrant is valid. So how do we tell if the warrant is valid? So we're going to start at the top. Anytime we look at a warrant, start at the top. Does it say district court on it? Does it have the term court on it? If it does, we're going to say yes. Okay, we're going to move down. Below that, you're going to see somebody's name. It has to have a specific name on it. That means they have the authority to take somebody who's named on that document into custody. It will also have an address on it. It will also, all the way down at the bottom, be signed and dated. And it will be signed by a judge, and it could be judge or it could be magistrate judge. They don't mean anything different. They don't really mean anything different. Magistrate judges can do everything a regular judge can do, so I don't know why they have a different name, but they literally can do everything a regular judge can do. So if all those components are correct, that's a valid judicial warrant. That means they could enter a private space to arrest somebody. But here's the key. Say you have a judicial warrant, right? And they're looking for Amy Ducouré, but they go to Amy Smith's house. That doesn't allow them to enter Amy Smith's house because that's not Amy Ducouré's house. Or say they have a warrant looking for Amy Ducre, but the address on it is my work address, but they come to my home with it. They cannot enter my home with it because that's not the address that's on the warrant. They can only enter the place where the address is. So if the address is for a house, they can enter that house. If the address is for a workplace, they can only enter that workplace. Even if I'm in the house and they're looking for me, but the address is for my job, they cannot come in my house. So all of those things have to be valid. It has to say court order. It has to have a name on it for a person that like lives or works where they're at, or generally is present where they're at. It has to have the address of the location that they want to enter, and it has to be signed by a judge and dated. Only then is that warrant valid. And there are some risk mitigation factors that we can take that we'll talk about on a different slide for when law enforcement does come to your house with a judicial warrant or to another private space, so that we can keep everybody else safe if that warrant is valid. So now we're going to talk about part 2. We're going to talk about what are your rights. So what happens when ICE comes knocking at your door or pulls you over on the street? The reason I put this car on this slide is because this used to be what ICE vehicles look like. Used to be. Right? They're white, they have a blue stripe. And the reason I did it like a couple years ago when I made this slideshow is because in Michigan, we might see Customs and Border Protection a lot more than we'd see ICE vehicles. So I put it here so you can tell the difference. An ICE vehicle is going to be white with a blue stripe. CBP is going to be always white with a green stripe. That's how you tell the difference. Right now, ICE is driving around in blacked out SUVs, like rap stars and thugs that are pulling people off the street, but this is generally what they look like. So one of the things that is important to know is that when you're talking about your constitutional rights, we are talking about rights that protect everybody. Everybody. The U.S. Constitution, when we talk about the Bill of Rights, it does not use the term citizen. It uses the terms people or persons, meaning that it applies equally to every human being that is found inside the United States, regardless of your status. And there are a lot of Make America Great Again humans who would like people to think that if you're an immigrant here or you're undocumented, that you don't have the same rights as U.S. citizens, and that is not the case. If you are a U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident, a visitor on a visa, a student on a visa, a worker on a visa, or you have no status at all in the United States, you have 100% constitutional protections. It doesn't matter who you are or what status you have. And the most important constitutional protection that we have is the right to remain silent. No matter what kind of law enforcement agent you encounter, whether it's ICE, local or state police, CBP, anybody, as long as we're not at the airport. Airport has special rules, but I'm talking like just generally, you have the right to remain silent. If they ask you to give your name, you have to give your name. I'm Amy Ducre. And then you don't have to answer any other questions for anybody, no matter what, if they're law enforcement. But our rights are not self-actualizing. One second. They don't just appear because we have them. You have to actually assert them. In order to protect your rights, in order to preserve your rights, you have to assert them. And just asserting them doesn't mean they won't be violated. So when we assert our rights, we have to sometimes assert them at the beginning of the encounter, and then when they're violated, we have to assert them again when we take people to court. But you can only take people to court if you've asserted your right from the beginning. So there's no magic words for it. The most important thing to say is I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I'm not going to answer any questions. So you want to do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing it out loud, because they are checking people for an accent, there are cards you can download off of the internet, and you can literally just put one in your wallet and hand it to law enforcement if you see them. And it literally lists all your rights. It says, I'm going to exercise my rights, and then you don't have to say anything at all other than your name. But it's important to remember that the reason we remain silent is because remaining silent is always better than lying. If you lie to law enforcement officers, it is a crime. If you lie to federal law enforcement officers, it is a 7-year felony. And they will indict you for the smallest lie. It doesn't have to be a big lie. It doesn't have to be a lie that matters. It can be any lie. And I tell this story every time. So if you've heard it, I apologize. But we represented an individual from Pakistan who was a lawful permanent resident. This was under the first Trump administration when Trump was talking about extreme vetting, right? Before he went back home to Pakistan to attend a wedding of his family member, he sat down with the FBI on a voluntary interview for extreme vetting because his attorney didn't know better. And he was asked some questions. And then he got on a plane the next day, flew back to Pakistan. 2 weeks later, he's trying to come back to the United States. They put him on the no-fly list. So we sued and said he's a lawful permanent resident. You can't keep him out of the United States. He has a right to return. And the judge agreed. The judge said, yes, Department of Homeland Security, you will let this individual come home. So the day that we won the lawsuit and we're making arrangements for our client to fly home, he gets indicted by the FBI and the Department of Justice for a felony for lying. He supposedly lied about how many Facebook pages he had. They asked him, how many Facebook pages you have? He said, I have one, when really he had two. And then when you talk to him on the phone and be like, why would you lie about something like that? And he's like, well, I didn't really lie. Like, I wasn't thinking about it. They asked me. I said I had one. I had one that I was using. He said I had one when I was like 16, but now I'm like almost 30. I don't use that one anymore because, it's kind of embarrassing what I had on there at 16. I didn't think about that. But he didn't come back to the United States because they wrote in his indictment all of these allegations of terrorism, so that they would ensure that if he did fly back, he was going to spend the next 2 years in a federal prison while he tried to fight those charges of lying about how many Facebook pages he has. So lying, it's better to remain silent than lie. And also, if you lie about something like your identity or your immigration status, and you go to adjust status later, you will get denied the ability to adjust status. So always remember that this is why we don't volunteer information, why we don't, just be like, we don't have anything to hide, so I'm going to talk. No, because if they want something, they'll find something. So remain silent, and remaining silent is better than lying. And I think this brother had a question. Sure. Yeah, I have a slide that covers that, but yeah, so yeah. So I actually have a slide that covers that, but just the short answer is yes. If you are worried, if you are a US, even if you're a US citizen, but you're worried about an ICE encounter and you're worried about getting unlawfully detained in an ICE encounter, yes, you should carry some proof of citizenship with you. Immigrants are always required, and visa holders are always required to carry proof of their status with them. They're required to do that. So how you do that, we'll talk about that in a second, more specifics. But U.S. citizens, if that's one of our risk mitigation factors that we're going to talk about later. But yeah, if you are worried about unlawful detention, you definitely want to carry your U.S. passport or some other form of ID, and we'll talk about what that looks like on another slide. So the other thing you have the right to do, everybody has the right to do, is to refuse entry to a private space. And if ICE does not have a judicial warrant, and that's all private spaces. That includes your house, your office, anywhere that you're out in public that's private, even your vehicle. Your vehicle is a private space so long as you are inside of it. If you are inside your vehicle, you are in a private space, and technically ICE cannot enter that vehicle without a warrant, which is why you hear them commanding everybody to get out of their car, because the minute you get out of your car, you are leaving a private space and entering a public space, and they have a lot more authority over you in public than they do in that car. So and yes, I know they're busting people's windows out. So we're going to get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. I have a slide for that. But yes, so that's one of the risk mitigation factors that we're going to talk about. So what happens if ICE comes to your home? The first thing that everybody needs to recognize is you have more constitutional protections in your house than you do anywhere on earth. It is a sanctuary. It is a place where no law enforcement agency can come without a judicial warrant. So we have the right to be a little arrogant in our home, a little bit pushy in our home with law enforcement. That is our right because it was granted to us by the U.S. Constitution. So the first thing that's important to know, if law enforcement comes to your house, do not open the door. Look out the window. First of all, we shouldn't be opening the door before we know who is out there anyways, because people are strange and strange things happen. So we should be looking. So when you look outside and you see that it's law enforcement, don't open the door. But if you have to open the door to talk to them through the door, a crack, that doesn't give them permission to come in. But it's better if you don't open the door, because law enforcement can be pushy and like push their way in the door if it's open, even if it's not lawful. So don't open the door. You also have the right to remain silent in your home, meaning you don't have to answer any questions at all, period, in your home, and you shouldn't. Always record everything with your phone, because if there is a dispute about what happens and it's a dispute between you and ICE, courts are going to believe law enforcement officers before they believe a citizen. And we saw when Alex from Minnesota was murdered on the street by ICE officers, how Kristi Noem and other people slandered him. They said he had a gun out. They said he was attacking officers. He came with the intention to commit violence, despite the fact that we had all seen the videos where he was helping a woman off the ground and got maced and then was shot in the back. So that's why we record everything. It keeps everybody safer and it holds people accountable. And if ICE comes to the door and they say, we have a warrant, the first thing you're going to do is be like, I need to see the warrant. But you don't open the door to see the warrant. You tell them, slide the warrant under the door. And if it doesn't fit under the door, you say, okay, go to that window over there, and you hold that warrant up to the window where I can review it. And they will go to a first floor window. They will hold the warrant up, and then you will review it. You will look from the top down. Does it say court? Does it have the person's name of somebody who lives in this house? Does it have the address of this house? And is it signed by a judge? ICE has been known to go to people's houses with warrants that look valid, but they're not signed. So like, make sure you're doing the full analysis, right? And so if they come to your house with a judicial warrant and it has all of those things, that we still should not let ICE enter our home, because what that means is that there's somebody there. So they say they come to my house with a judicial warrant. They're looking for Amy Ducouré. I'm home. I'm going to go outside. Why am I going to go outside? Because they're going to bust my door down, or they're going to come in the house to take me into custody. There's no use in resisting, because resisting makes everybody else less safe. It puts your bodily integrity on the line, especially when they have a valid judicial warrant. So whoever the warrant is for is going to go onto the porch, and they're going to be taken into custody without incident, without resisting and without incident. And then their family member is going to have time to call an attorney, figure out what's going on, figure out if they're entitled to a bond, and do all of those necessary legal steps, because that person is safe and everybody else is safe. If you let them come in your house to arrest you, then you're putting everybody else in your house at risk, because now they have an ability to interact with all the other humans in your house, and you've put everybody else at risk. So if they come to your house with a judicial warrant, we look at the warrant. If it's valid, that person goes outside. If it's not valid, you're going to go sit down and turn the TV on, and like they'll leave and mind their own business. If they don't have a judicial warrant, you have no reason to continue to engage with ICE at all. And you're going to tell them, thank you, I'm not going to answer any questions. You can go home now. And then you leave that interaction. The best way to keep yourself safe with ICE is to leave the interaction as fast as possible. So if they don't have the right to come into your house, go sit down, watch TV, and let them go about their day. The other thing is never sign any documentation without an attorney. It's very, very important. And if they are looking for somebody at your house, and they say, can we just come in and look around? The important thing is to never consent to the law enforcement coming into your house. But just like your right to remain silent, it doesn't just exist because you have it. You have to actually state it. So you're going to say, I do not consent to entry. I do not consent to a search. You cannot come in here. Be very specific about it, because if you're not specific, they're going to be like, well, she didn't say anything, so I thought she was giving us permission. No, you have to be very, very specific. And if they say we have paperwork to leave for so-and-so, you'd be like, okay, leave it on the porch. We'll get it when you leave. And then just stop talking to them and go sit down somewhere. They will eventually leave. So what happens if ICE stops you in your car? First of all, I just want to reiterate, your car is a private space. ICE cannot enter your car without a warrant, and yes, they are busting people's windows out. That does not make it lawful. It does not make it lawful just because they've done it. So what we have to do is we have to assert our rights from the beginning. When you are pulled over, and we went over the badges at the beginning, right? If you're pulled over by like state of police, Michigan, Farmington Hills Police, you can probably relax a little bit. That's going to be a traffic stop. You're going to get a ticket. Your insurance is going to go up. But you know, that's most likely not going to be an ICE interaction. But if it is ICE, you have the right to remain silent. You do not have to identify yourself other than to say your name. And if you're the driver, you have to turn over your driver's license, because in Michigan is not a stop and show state. There are some states where they're a stop and show state, meaning if you are stopped by any law enforcement officer, you have to show ID. That is not the case in Michigan. In Michigan, if you are stopped by a law enforcement officer and they say, let me see your ID, and they're just like stopping you for no reason, you can be like, I'm not showing you my ID. No, you have to give your name. My name is Amy Ducray, and I'm not answering any other questions. Those are the magic words. My name is Amy, and I'm not answering any more questions. I want to leave. That's the magic phrase. If they say, but if you're driving a vehicle, Michigan law requires you to present a valid motor vehicle license to law enforcement. So the person who's driving the car has to show their driver's license to prove that they are lawfully allowed to drive that car. And then once you've done that, you can be like, I'm not going to answer any questions. You have the right to remain silent. You should be filming. So, and then the other thing is if I'm driving in the car with 4 other people, the only person that has to answer questions is the driver. The driver has to give their name. Nobody else in the car has to even give their name, because it is a private space. So what we have advised people to do in the past is, if you know that you're undocumented and you know you're at risk of being under the jurisdiction and picked up by ICE, do not drive a motor vehicle unless you absolutely have to. Have somebody who has lawful status or somebody who is a U.S. citizen drive you around if you have the ability to do it. I know it's a big ask. I know not everybody can do that, but that is the advice that we have. And the other thing is you should never answer questions about other people in your vehicle. Because you make other people less safe. Yeah. If they ask you any other questions, you say, I'm not answering any questions. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. Here is where we have risk mitigation factors that come into play, because we know ICE is aggressive, because they are untrained, unqualified, and undisciplined for the most part. So if you are worried about getting your window busted in, or getting dragged out of your car, or escalating a situation, there are things you can do in this situation other than exercising your right. I want you to know you have rights and you are fully empowered to exercise all of them. But I also want you to know that not everybody has the same comfort level with risk as everybody else. Like, I'm very risk adverse. I don't want to be risky at all. And it's kept me out of trouble most of my life. It's a good habit. Other people are like, these are my rights. You know, I'm going to die, protecting my rights, because that protects everybody else's rights. So you have to gauge your own risk interest. But if you are risk adverse like me, and ICE pulls you over and they're like, what's your immigration status? I'm going to be like, bro, I'm a U.S. citizen. Here is my passport card. And that will prove that you are a U.S. citizen. Or here's my passport booklet. Or here is my enhanced driver's license. And I want to be very frank with you. An enhanced driver's license is the one with the U.S. flag on it. Having the real ID, despite all of the hype that they told us when we were forced to get it, is not sufficient to prove you're a U.S. citizen, nor is it sufficient to prove that you actually have lawful status in the United States. Because ICE's position on the real ID is that the person who has the real ID had lawful status when they got it, but it doesn't mean they have lawful status now, because IDs expire every 4 years or something like that. So the real ID is insufficient. So you do not have to carry your passport card, or your enhanced ID, and you do not have to present it. But if you are risk adverse, that might be a way to end that interaction quickly, is to prove that. If you are here with lawful permanent resident status, you are required to carry your green card with you. It is a requirement to carry your green card with you, the actual card. So if you are risk adverse, maybe you're presenting, you might want to say to an ICE officer, I'm a lawful permanent resident, here's my green card. Take a look at it and then get out of that interaction faster. The same thing as if you're a visa holder. Maybe you want to carry a copy of your visa around with you. I will say, for visa holders, if you have a visa stamped in your foreign passport, you probably don't want to carry around foreign identification documents with you. Like if you have a foreign or international driver's license, you don't want to carry that. If you have a foreign passport, you don't want to carry that. That's some evidence that you're not here with status, and they are using that to take you into custody. So maybe you want to carry a photocopy or the receipt copy with you as opposed to that actual passport. Maybe, maybe not. So the I-94 that you print off of the internet, it may or may not. It's going to be up to the ICE officer. It is better to carry a copy of the physical visa that has your pic, especially if you have one that has a picture on it. Right, but when you reapply for your H-1B visa to extend it after the original one's expired, you get a receipt for that. Carry the receipt. Yeah, carry the receipt, not the I-94. Carry that receipt. I know, yeah. An I-94 just means that you were expected at the border. It doesn't mean anything. An I-94 says that you were inspected at the border, and at the time you went to the border, they let you in because you had valid, lawful ability to be here. But it's not proof of your status. Carry that receipt. Yes. An I-94 is not sufficient. It's not. An I-94 is proof of parole into the country or inspection at the border. It's not sufficient. Carry your visa with you or carry your receipt if you don't have a valid visa. It doesn't, carry your receipt. The I-94 is not going to be sufficient. U.S. citizen, you don't have to. You don't have to, but if you want to like end the encounter quicker, you're going to want to carry either a passport booklet, like the big fat book that they put the stamps in, or the card, or like if you have an enhanced driver's license with the flag on it, like everybody in my family except for me has one of those. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you want to prove your US citizenship status, yes. Yeah. And I think sister had a question. For the most part, a physical picture might be okay, especially since you're not required to do it. I would not recommend carrying a picture of your passport or any other documents on your phone. No, because for two reasons. Number one, because you're supposed to be filming with your phone when you're encountering law enforcement. So it's very difficult to film and show a picture at the same time. Number two, that picture might be hard to find because you might have to scroll through other pictures or videos to find it. They get shuffled down as you take more pictures. And number three, most of the time, ICE agents are not going to let you pull out your phone and start showing them pictures. They don't care because they're undisciplined, unqualified, untrained, and they're always heightened. Like we're like relaxed more than they are. They're always at like some state of heightened like aggression, and like it's better to have a physical document you can show them. Yeah, physical copy. Yeah, real IDs are completely useless. Yeah. Technically, technically, yes. I mean, are they going to take a photocopy of it? They may, but you are required to carry that green card with you anyways. Immigration law requires certain documents to be carried by certain immigrants when they're here, and that would include the green card. And I know people don't like to carry them because, like, what if I lose it? It's hard to get it back. It's such a hassle. It costs money. Got to fill out all this paperwork, and I got to wait like 7 months to get it. So I get it. Like a lot of people don't want to carry it, but like certain immigrants are required to carry by law, required. So we are always trying to follow the law. Keeps people out of trouble. Yeah. Yeah, only the citizens. So that's only for. So that's she said on the license the American flag. I'm talking about an enhanced license to prove your U.S. citizenship. The only people that can get an enhanced license are the people who can get a U.S. passport. In order to get that enhanced license, you have to take your U.S. passport to the Secretary of State's office when you get your license. You pay like a $45 fee, and then you get it. Yeah, like this. Like this has a U.S. the U.S. flag right here. If you are not a U.S. citizen, you cannot get that. You don't have a passport? Okay. Yeah, you can carry your passport with you. Like you can carry, if you're worried about it, you can carry your passport. If you're worried about even being a U.S. citizen and you have an accent, carry your U.S. passport with you. It's getting a little noisy in here. Yes. I mean, in your case, so her question is what happens if you're out like in the marketplace and you're speaking like, yeah, the ICE can encounter you. They can. You have to know that, which is why it's important to know that they can encounter you because it's just they're using these racist markers to determine whether or not they think you're lawfully present here. So they might encounter you if you're speaking a foreign language, which is why if you're worried about it, you should carry with you documentation that proves your lawful right to be in the United States, including your U.S. citizenship, like passport or something. And then know that just because they encounter you doesn't mean you're going to have a problem. They're just encountering you. And then also know that you have the right to not answer any of their questions. You never have to answer how long you've been here, when you came here, whether you were born here, how you got your citizenship status. You never have to answer any of those, and we shouldn't. Minors, same thing. Like minors can't be questioned without their parents. Yeah. I think there was one brother that had a question. The one that's signed is sufficient. Yeah. The approved one, yes. 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 They can't come inside your house. Yes. That's actually not true. That's actually not true. So he's saying that there has been some chatter that ICE has always been able to go into the house with a administrative warrant. That's not true, and even the Republicans know that's not true. Just because somebody says it doesn't mean it's true. What actually happened is that this administration put out a memo that said that ICE can go into homes with an administrative warrant. This administration put out a memo rescinding what they called a policy. Just because there's a difference between policy and law. A policy means that some government official said, hey, I think this is a good idea. We're going to do this. That's a policy. A law means it was passed by Congress and signed by the President of the United States. Policies do not have the effect of law, and it is well settled constitutional law that a law enforcement officer cannot enter your home without a judicial warrant. And the reason that is because if they could do that, cops would get administrative warrants. They would be like, hey, I think this guy is selling dope at his house, and I'm going to go get a warrant. I'm going to draw it up. I'm going to have the chief of police sign it. And then I'm going to go in this guy's house and bust his door down. And without any checks and balances, you can't do that. The Constitution and the law is clear. They cannot enter your house without a judicial warrant. And there has not been one instance in the United States that I know of that has been reported where ICE has actually went into somebody's home with an administrative warrant. That has never happened. No, you have not seen that on TV. TikTok is, first of all, TikTok is not real. TikTok is not, we should be screening, we need to monitor our screen time, sir. So people are being deported. So there are only certain circumstances. In the United States, you're afforded due process. There are only certain circumstances, and we're like a little bit off, so we're going to save some of these questions for the end so we can get through the rest of the slideshow, inshallah. But there are only certain circumstances. If you come into the United States and you did not get inspected at the border, meaning you walked across the land border or you swam across the Detroit River from Canada, You don't need a judge's order to be deported. They can put you on a plane and send you back to wherever you came from. They can drive you back across the border and drop you off. If you are here and you've ever had legal status, they cannot deport you without some administrative process at a minimum. Meaning, if you are a lawful permanent resident or you are somebody else, they have to put you through in a process, and a judge, an administrative judge, it's not a judge, it's an administrative judge, has to say this person's removable from the United States before they can deport you. Is there, like I said at the beginning, there are no foolproof answers. This administration is determined to push the boundaries and see what they can get away with, which is why sometimes we have to assert our rights at the beginning by saying, I'm not going to answer questions. You can't come in here. This is a violation of my rights. I want an attorney. I'm not signing anything. You can't send me anywhere. You can't take me into custody. I'm a U.S. citizen. And then they're going to do it anyways. Like, we've seen them do it anyways. But then we have to assert, and that's when we have to, if we've done all of the things we're supposed to do at the beginning, by asserting all of our rights at the beginning, we're going to be able to go to court, and we are going to be able to hold this administration, those individual actors, ICE and CBP accountable by making them pay us money for the violation of our rights. That's how you reinforce your rights the second time. So not asserting them at the beginning is always detrimental. But asserting them at the beginning does not mean that there's not going to be some anomaly that happens and people's rights aren't going to be violated, because we've seen people's rights get violated. It's why I have a job, quite literally, because if people's rights didn't get violated, there'd be no need for care. There'd be no need for civil rights attorneys. It happens. It happens sometimes by negligence, and sometimes it happens by malice. With this administration, it's more often than not malice. But we go to court and we reinforce those rights. So there's nothing I can tell you here today that's going to ensure that you're not going to have an adverse interaction with ICE. I can't promise you that, because that's not the reality that we live in, quite frankly. So let's just finish up traffic stops, and then I think I got like a couple more slides, and then we can take some more in-depth questions, inshallah. So you do not have to, so the other thing that is important, you're going to tell the officers, I'm not going to answer any questions. Everybody in the vehicle is going to say, I'm not answering any questions, and they have the right to remain silent. Then you are never going to consent to a search of your car. First of all, because if they get you out of your car, you've left your private space and put yourself in a public space. Now you've made yourself more vulnerable to law enforcement interactions. Then you're going to say, I do not consent to a search of my car. There is only one reason, and one reason alone, that ICE can search, law enforcement in general can search your car. And that's if there is obvious evidence of a crime in your car. Like if you got a kilo of cocaine sitting on your passenger seat, they're like, I can see that, I want to search your car. They can search your car. Absent that, they cannot search your car because it is a private space without a warrant. So we never consent to a search of our car. And that goes for our person, that goes for our purse or our backpack, or like one of the 77 bags that I'm always carrying around in my car every day. We don't have to consent to a search of any of our personal belongings or our vehicle. And that's important to remember, don't lie and don't provide fake or false immigration or identity documents. That will be a problem for you if you're a migrant. It's also important to know CBP has been known to do traffic enforcement, especially in Detroit. Do not resist. Once you've identified yourself by giving your name and as the driver of your vehicle, proving that you have the lawful right to drive away, you can also say, am I free to go? Or am I being detained? If they say you're free to go, you be like, thank you, have a nice day, and you drive off. If they say you're being detained, you're going to tell them, I'm not answering any questions and I want an attorney, and bring your supervisor here. And those are the three things you say. And you don't have to say it like in any particular, there's no fancy language. You can just be like, I'm not going to answer your questions. I'd like to talk to an attorney, and bring your supervisor. And the minute they tell you you're free to go, you're like, thanks, have a good day, goodbye, and you leave. Like, leave that interaction as soon as possible. And make sure that if you have fear, you have your identity documents on you that prove that you have lawful presence in the U.S. And then what happens if ICE comes to your work or your workplace? Like I said, ICE is allowed into all public spaces without any type of warrant, right? And this includes, like, if we work in an office building. There's me and Sister Sylvia, who's here with me from our Director of Safe Spaces. We work in an office space. There's We have a coffee shop. It's great. We have Yemeni coffee in our office. We have masala in our office. We have like 2 boutiques in our office. And then we have a private office space with locked doors where only people who work there can work. So the places where people can walk in and go visit all these great like boutiques and coffee houses and stuff, that's a public space. ICE can come in there. But where our office space is, between 2 locked doors when people make the effort to actually lock them back, that's a private space. ICE can't come back there with a warrant. So know where your public and your private spaces are. Know that ICE can't enter private spaces. If you have a break room, a private office, a locked locker room, those are all private spaces. ICE can't go in there. And if you are approached by ICE in a public space, do not allow them entry into private spaces. Don't be like, yes, please come into the masala and let's have some chai. No, we're not doing that. We're like, thank you, have a nice day. This is a private space, go home. And so we don't allow them into private spaces. We don't answer questions about our immigration status. We're going to tell them, I'm going to remain silent. I'm not going to answer questions. And then you don't answer questions. And then you ask them, am I free to go? And if they say yes, you'd be like, okay, thank you, have a nice day, and then leave. The important thing is we also don't answer information about other people. Somebody came to the office the other day, like I think about 2 or 3 months ago. They knocked on the door. I'm very known in the office, even by people like not at CARE, because I chatty. I don't know if you can tell, but I talk to everybody. So people know my name. They know my face, even if they work in a different business in our office. Somebody came to a different business in our office, knocked on the door and said, hey, is Amy Ducre here today? And that person walked them down to my office. That person could have had gone and killed me. Like, who knows? Like, I didn't know that person. She didn't know that person. Nobody knew who that was. We don't do that, right? I have a rule. Like, if you call my house and be like, hey, is Bilal home today? I'd be like, I don't know. Who are you? And why are you calling to ask if Bilal's home? We don't provide information about other people because we make other people unsafe when we do that. So if somebody shows up at your place of business and is like, hey, is Amy Ducre here? And you're like, nah. And they're like, does she work on Thursdays? We're not answering that because ICE will come back on Thursday and pick me up, right? If they're coming to the masjid and asking questions like, hey, is Muhammad here today? Does he pray Juma here? Like, we don't answer questions about other people because we make them unsafe. And what you should be doing if you own a business or you are on the board of masjid leadership is you should be training 2 or 3 people who are here, who are at prayers most every day, most all of the prayers, about what to do if law enforcement comes in. And you should be telling them, and you should be telling everybody else, if law enforcement comes into the masjid, you 3 are going to go greet the law enforcement officers. You're going to tell them that they're not welcome here. You're going to tell them this is a private space. You're going to be the only ones answering questions. And you are going to take charge. And everybody else who might be at risk is going to have a chance to go maybe find a more private place to be in the masjid. And everybody else in the masjid is going to know that they're not answering questions because we've given this training, and they're going to go find the people who are in charge of answering questions, and we're going to let them take care of that. So always remain silent, always film them, do not answer questions about other people, and ask them politely to leave. So what happens if ICE comes to you in public? ICE is encountering people on the street. So walking down the street, ICE might encounter you. This has never happened before. This is an anomaly. The first thing is do not run. And I will say this again, there are other teachers here. Do not run. When I was a 5th grade teacher, it was inevitable that somebody at recess would be like, Sister Amy, somebody's chasing me. And I'd be like, sir, if you're not running, they're not chasing, right? Don't run, because what happens when you run is people will chase you. And then you have made your situation unsafe. You are unsafe because now people who are untrained, unqualified, and undisciplined are now chasing you down the street, and they're upset and they're aggressive, and you're going to get injured. Do not run. It's not cute. I know people on TikTok are doing it. I've seen the videos. I don't use TikTok, but people send me videos, so I watch them. But like, I've seen it, like, where people think it's funny to make the ICE officers chase them so that other people can get away. Don't do that. It is not safe. So don't run. Don't lie. The first thing you should do is be like, if ICE stops you and they're like, hey, you, come here, and then they approach you, you'd be like, why are you stopping me? You have a right to know why they're stopping you. And if they give you some reason, you'd be like, okay, cool. Am I free to go? And if they say you're free to go, walk away. Like, literally just walk away. Don't engage, don't argue, don't call names, because then they get rude. Just walk away. And if they tell you no, you're not free to go, you can be like, okay, I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm going to remain silent. And then if they further say that they're going to detain you and they're putting you in handcuffs and putting you in a vehicle, you're going to say, listen, I want an attorney and I want to make sure I make a phone call. That's what you're going to say. If you have risk mitigation factors, like if you're like, I don't want to do this and I think I'm going to have a problem because I have an accent or because I wear a hijab or like whatever, that's when you're going to want to be like, listen, maybe we don't want to answer questions, but I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm a US citizen. Here's my passport. Here's my real ID. Here's my green card. Here is my, my document proving that I have a valid visa to be here. That's what we're going to be doing if we have risk. And yes, US citizens too. We do not have an obligation to provide any proof of our citizenship. ICE has no jurisdiction over US citizens, but that has not stopped them from infringing upon our rights. So if you are a US citizen and you don't want to have a problem and you want to end that encounter safely and quickly as possible, you're going to provide your ID that proves that you have US citizenship. And then you're going to be like, okay, am I free to go? And like basically walk away. If something happens to you and you think that you've been detained inappropriately, or they're giving you a hard time and you think that you're going to be arrested, do not resist. Resisting will make you unsafe. What we know is that for Black and brown people in the United States, law enforcement encounters are inherently dangerous. They often lead to physical altercations, bodily injury, and like significant higher risk of death for certain minorities, so especially men. So do not resist. There are ways you can protect your rights, but you have to be safe to protect your rights, right? You have to be safe. But once you're safe and your rights are violated, then we can go to court and we can make people pay. But there are certain things that will happen to you that will make you never be the same again. Or if you are passed away, unfortunately, because of an inappropriate encounter with a law enforcement agency, like those people like Alex Petrie from Minnesota and Miss Good from Minnesota, like somebody else is going to be enforcing your rights, but you're no longer with us. So the main objective in any law enforcement encounter is to end that encounter quickly and safely without further problems. Yeah. Mhm. So what they bite to and what they have the right to do in that situation is different. So he's asking, like, say I'm stopped by ICE and I'm like, hey, I'm a US citizen and I show my ID. Can they still stop me? No, they can't stop you. They have no business to talk to you at that point. Once you've shown a picture ID and your lawful status, they have no right to keep you there as a US citizen. None at all. Does that mean that they're going to let you go? It may or may not. It depends on that ICE officer. But for the most part, they're going to release you because they will get sued if they don't release you. And ICE officers can be held personally liable for civil rights violations. That's something that came out a few years ago. And so they're going to let you go most of the time. They don't want that kind of problem in their life. That's a great question. It's a great question. He said, do we have a legal right to ask their badge number? So in the state of Michigan, if you ask a law enforcement officer that you're having an encounter in, for the most part, under most circumstances, they have to give you their name and badge number by law and by policy of the Michigan, like state police licensing agency that license all police officers in the state of Michigan. For the purposes of immigration enforcement, that's not the case. Like there's no federal law or federal policy that requires them to give you their name and their badge number. No. Which is why we look at the badges. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that there are some Congress people who are appalled by what's going on that are looking into that. I'm quite certain of it. But I don't have any particular knowledge of any specific bill that's coming through. But they don't have to show you, which is why it's important to take note. If we're filming, believe me, the internet's going to figure out who that person is. The internet, when Miss Good was killed, within 2.5 hours or 3 hours, they figured out who that officer was, despite the fact that he had a mask on. So the internet's going to figure it out. So that's why we film stuff, so that when stuff happens, we can figure it out. That's why we looked at the badges at the beginning, so we can look and see whose uniform and what badges are there, so we know which agency to go to, because they can also figure out who was on the scene when something happens. So that's why that's important. Absolutely, everybody can make a video. Everybody can make a video. If you're making videos, stay a little bit back. If you're interacting with the officer, you can't stay back. But what I've done sometimes when I see stuff that I don't like by law enforcement officers, I'll stop and film because like that makes other people safe. If you stop and film, because now if something goes wrong, you have it on film and you can find them later. I mean, you can ask. Legally, you can ask. I would ask, what's your name? What's your badge number? What agency do you work for? But legally, they don't have to respond. And I think this brother had a question. I mean, they might take it out of your hand, but like they should give it right back. Like, I don't know, like it depends on the age of the ICE officer. Like if you showed me your driver's license at my age, even with these progressive lenses on, there's a really good chance I'd need to hold it to be able to read it, quite frankly. If they detain you, so we'll talk about how to find somebody if they're detained. But most likely right now they're taking people either to downtown Detroit to the USCIS field office or to North Lake Correctional Facility, which is located in Baldwin, Michigan. Every once in a while, like they used to take people to Carson City Correctional Facility in Michigan and also the one in Huron, but I can't remember the name of it. It's got a different name, but it's in Port Huron. And but they're taking more and more people to North Lake Correctional Facility now. I mean, it depends. Everybody's case is different. Honestly, they held a U.S. citizen for 3 days until they proved for U.S. citizenship status, and they're holding migrants for months at a time. So it really depends. That's not something I can give you a cut and dry answer for, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Yes, and U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens can sue ICE for unlawful violations of their civil rights. Yes, we have a law that permits that. That's kind of how that's done. Hang on, there's a sister asking a question. Yeah, you can, but they're not going to give it to you. Yeah, go ahead. No, so yeah, so your name and date of birth is sufficient for ICE to check your status. If I went there and told them I was Amy Ducray, they're going to look in their system and realize that nobody ever named Amy Ducray that looks like me has ever been through immigration, ever. They're going to find no record, which means they're going to realize that I'm a U.S. citizen very quickly. If you don't have to, but they are holding U.S. citizens. They are holding U.S. citizens. If you don't have your passport on and they think that you're undocumented and that you walked across the border, they're going to take you into custody. And now your family or your attorney is going to have to show up at ICE or the North Lake Correctional Facility and try to prove that you're a U.S. citizen and get you out. And they've held U.S. citizens up to 3 days at this point in time, is the longest I know of. I mean, it's up to everybody. Like, it depends on whether you want to really, really, really enforce your rights and kind of die on that hill, or whether you're like, I don't want to go to custody for 3 days, so let me go ahead and do this. Do not carry, no, that's what she asked. Do not carry pictures on your phone for several reasons. Number one, we should be filming all interactions with our phone. Number two, if you take a picture today and you take a picture tomorrow and a picture the next day and a picture the next day and a picture the next day, now you're scrambling through your pictures to find that picture of your passport. Number three, ICE is not going to probably look at your phone. They don't want to do that. They're not calm enough to figure that out. Most of the time, they're like animated and not always logically thinking. And number three, they're going to take your phone away from you. If they take you into custody, you will not have access to your phone. Yes, they are. It is not. That's what I said a minute ago. Like, literally, if you have an enhanced driver's license, it has a flag on it. That will prove that you're a U.S. citizen because it has the flag. It means you presented your U.S. passport to get that ID. An enhanced, the real ID has the yellow star on it. All that means is that you got that driver's license at a time when you had lawful status. ICE is literally saying that's not sufficient to prove that you are a U.S. citizen, nor is it sufficient to prove that you currently have lawful status. So it is completely useless. Unless you're flying on a domestic flight, that enhanced ID or the real ID, the one with the yellow star, is completely useless. Yes, photocopy is acceptable. Go ahead. What do you mean? I'm not sure if I can understand your question. Oh, so he's asking like if you're detained by ICE because you are not a US citizen, but you have some other lawful status, is that going to give you a problem when you try to like adjust status or like maintain your status? No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay, so let's talk about safety planning and resources. So if you are here and you are any type of migrant and you think that you might be under the jurisdiction of ICE, it is very important to engage in some safety planning and take part in some resources. The first thing is that you want to do if you are here, you want to keep your ID and your license and state ID and other documents accessible. If you are a non-citizen, that means keep copies of all of your documents that prove your citizenship, or I'm sorry, your status. Keep all of them with a trusted person and at your house. And this is because you're carrying, say we're walking around with our green card, right? Which is what we're supposed to be doing. And ICE comes and they decide they're going to detain you anyways. Because remember at the beginning, I said even if you have status, but maybe you committed a minor offense, ICE can take you into custody. Now, when they take you into custody, they take possession of all of your belongings, your phone, your wallet, your IDs, everything. It goes into a little bag, they seal it, they put it on a shelf until you get released. So you don't have access to it. But you need an attorney because an attorney is going to come get you out. They're going to fight for your status. They're going to say, what's going on? But in order to do that, they might need to prove that you have lawful status in the United States. So having a photocopy of your green card, your visa, what have you at home is very, very helpful in being able to do that. So keep copies of keep your stuff on you and keep copies of it at home. With a trusted person who knows how to get it. Don't just like put it in your sock drawer and pray that somebody will find it someday. Like people have to know where it is, right? You want to have attorney organizations or numbers saved, right? We want to know them. And I know like we're all like nobody memorizes numbers anymore. And that's so true. Like I know my childhood phone number from when I was like 8, but I don't know my son who's sitting right over there. I could not tell you what his cell phone number is at this point in time. Could not tell you what it is. But if you have an immigration issue and you need an attorney, you might want to work on memorizing that number because when you go to immigration lockup, they're going to give you a phone call. And you might want to be calling your attorney to make sure that you're getting the assistance that you need. You definitely want to have a trusted person's phone number, your husband, your wife, your mom, your aunt, your whomever is your trusted person. You want to have their number memorized because if you don't have an attorney, they can find you one as long as you can get a hold of them. And also write them down. If you have a dedicated immigration attorney, make sure that number is written down and it's left with your paperwork for your trusted person that's going to have all of your copies of your documents. The other thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have a family plan if you have children. And we have had this situation where sometimes maybe you're a migrant here, but all of your children are U.S. citizens. If they take you into custody, your children as U.S. citizens may not go into custody with you, and you wouldn't want them to either. And if you don't have a family plan in place, your children will go into Child Protective Services custody, meaning they will go into foster homes. But if you have a power of attorney and a guardianship papers filled out and completed and left with somebody, they will be able to take custody of your children. So your children, while you're fighting whatever immigration issue you have, your children will go to school, they'll get medical treatment, they'll live a life with somebody that you know and that you trust, and a Muslim, because there are not enough Muslim foster homes, I can tell you that. We're fighting Muslims being placed in Christian homes every day. So you will have the ability to make sure that you are providing the proper care and custody for your child if you have the right documentation in place. There has been incidences where people have been deported without their U.S. citizen children. And this is also especially true if you have children who are derivatives, like say you're here on an H-1B visa and your children are derivatives of your H-1B visa, but you get taken into custody. Like you don't want your children to go into foster homes here and then you get deported and now there's no real way to transition your children back home, or God forbid, like two parents pass away at the same time and both of them are migrants and you got two non-U.S. citizen children and all of their families are in India or somewhere else. And this is a real story. This really happened. And now you have to figure out, Child Protective Services has to figure out if, like, who to send those kids to, or whether they're going to be raised here in the United States away from their family. So having these, and it's uncomfortable to talk about it, right? We don't want to talk about what happens when we pass away and all of these, very sad plans, but it's very much necessary. So you need to have that. The other thing is you need to have somebody designated to be in charge of your affairs. That's where the power of attorney comes in place. If you are working in the United States and you have a bank account and you get taken into custody, sir, nobody has access to your bank account, which means if you need bond money to get out of immigration jail, you don't have access to your money, because nobody has your ability to get money out of your bank account. If you have a power of attorney prepared and somebody knows that they have, like, your bank account information, they know where to go get your money, they can pay your bills, they can make sure your rent, your mortgage, your light bill is paid so your lights stay on while you're in custody. They can get you your bond money if you need it. If you get removed from the United States, that person can empty your bank account and send the money to you wherever you are removed to. But you have to have that in place before you get into custody, because it's very difficult to get that done once you're in custody. And then if you designate somebody to be the caretaker of your children, make sure they agree, because they have to sign the forms. And then have a safety plan so your children also know, if they're old enough to know, who should be taking custody of them should something happen to you. So have all of that. People need to know your A number. That's very important, because if you are detained, if a loved one is detained, there is a fancy website that you can go to. It's locator.ice.gov, and you can search people by their A number, and you can figure out where they're placed. So it can take up to 24 hours for information to be put on here. So you might have to be patient. If you have an attorney, it takes a lot less time, because they'll just call the USCIS office or the ICE office and figure out where you are. But if you don't have an attorney, then your family can find you using this locator. If you are monitoring court cases and things like that, you can go to these other two websites, the other website or the other 1-800 number, to get access to court, make sure you're going to your loved one's court date and whatnot, because you'll be able to find it there. And then some legal resources. 2 agencies that do rapid response for ICE detentions is the National Lawyers Guild. They have a rapid response hotline up there. It's 313-925-2626. They have a network of attorneys across the state of Michigan that can help when people are detained by ICE. Even if you have a criminal issue related to, like, free speech, they'll come help you. Or Care Michigan, we have an immigration and civil rights attorney. His name is Jad Salame. We have represented people who are detained by ICE. We do deportation defense, and we have a rapid response protocol for when people are taken into custody. So you can either call or email us. If you know somebody who's taken into custody after hours, it's better to email, because I monitor the email 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The phone will roll the voicemail after 4 p.m. on a Thursday. So if you have, if you know people you can that have a pressing need, you can email us or call us. So I think with that, we have probably a few minutes for questions, not too many, because we kind of did them. I'm going to start with the sisters first, because they've asked less questions, inshallah. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, so she said she's a U.S. citizen, but she's getting a license to carry a concealed weapon. And if she's approached by ICE, how do you do that? Well, I mean, that's a question for your concealed weapons permit instructor, quite frankly. I know if you're stopped by local law enforcement, you have an affirmative duty to declare that you are a concealed weapons permit holder and that you're carrying a concealed weapon. And that's supposed to make everybody else safer. We've seen in some instances where that's made people less safe, but that's your affirmative obligation. My belief is that if you're approached by ICE, you should probably do that too, because they are considered a quasi law enforcement agency. And also, they're making excuses for why they shot that man in the back, and it was because he had a gun. And even though the gun was, like, in his waistband and he didn't have access to it, he wasn't reaching for it, they still shot him. So, like, letting people know that from the beginning can really shape how that and how that interaction might play out. And like I said, there's no foolproof way, but it's probably better to disclose. And I'm not certain whether you have an actual legal obligation. And that's because this is not something that ICE has ever done before, right? They've never done these kind of crazy tactics on the street before. So, and then the sister. So there's a rumor that a U.S. citizen was deported. There's a rumor. It's unverified rumor, and they were deported without judge's approval. A judge would never approve the deportation of a U.S. citizen. And despite what they're telling you in this administration about like denaturalizing citizens, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And that requires an actual judge, not an administrative judge, to do. And it's an entire process, and it's very difficult to do. So there's no judge that would approve the removal of a U.S. citizen. We don't have this law that allows us to just expatriate people. Like we don't just exile people. Like this is not like 16th century England. Like we don't do that. Okay. Yes. At the airports? So at the airport, a real ID is sufficient enough to get you on an airplane. If you don't have the real ID, you might not be able to get on an airplane. I will say, however, TSA, which is the Transportation Security Administration, which is like the people who want you to go through the x-ray scanners and they want to, well, no, we're not taking our shoes off anymore, but they're x-raying all your bags. They are working with ICE and CBP. So if you go to an airport and you are undocumented or you are somebody that they're looking for, they are turning people over at the airport and people are being arrested at the airport. That is a fact. So TSA is not doing it, but they're going to pull you aside for a secondary screening, and they're going to wait till CBP comes and takes custody of you. So if you are undocumented or you are here without status or you have some other immigration issue that you know about, we might want to rethink whether we're flying even domestically right now. Like that's just a fact. It's everywhere. It's wherever immigrants live. Yes, they're required to arrest 3,000 people a day. They don't care who it is, as long as they meet their quota. This brother in the back. You have to speak up just a little bit. I'm sorry. So no. So his question is, can ICE, like the way you can be detained for like minor criminal activity, can you be detained for traffic violations? The quick answer to that is no. Like if you get pulled over for a speeding ticket and you have to pay that ticket, that is not a criminal, that is a civil infraction. However, say you didn't pay that traffic ticket and now you got a criminal bench warrant for a show cause, that changes it into a different situation. But for a simple traffic violation, for a ticket that you've paid because you've sped or you got in a fender bender because you were looking at your phone and rear-ended somebody, ICE doesn't have jurisdiction over you for that. And then, hang on, this brother here had his hand up. Okay, inshallah. So his question is, because I said, like, if they indicate they're going to detain you, to tell them that you want an attorney, what does that really do? Does that mean they're going to wait and let you call an attorney, or you're going to call when you get there? What that means is, like, if you're being detained, that means they're going to take you in to custody, right? They're not going to let you call an attorney right there. But what they're going to let you do is call an attorney when you get processed into whatever processing facility you're going to, whether that's Calhoun County Jail or North Lake Correctional Facility. And then they're going to let you get an attorney. But what it also means is that they can no longer ask you any questions at all without your attorney present. If you say, I'm going to remain silent, right, they can still ask you questions. You don't have to answer them, but they can still ask. If you say, I want an attorney, they cannot ask you any more questions. Yeah. Yes. And they're not accepting the global entry ID. No. I know it's a quasi-federal. It's not a ID. It is a indication that you have received a federal benefit, even pre-check. It's not technically a federal ID. Like you could not like it's not a federal ID in the way that your passport is an actual federal ID. It means that you have went through a background check and that you've been granted this permission to do something specific. They're not taking them. I'm aware of that, but I'm telling you what ICE is doing. Like that's a debatable issue about whether they should accept it or they shouldn't accept it, but they're not. Their advice is to carry a copy of your passport card, or your enhanced license. I would say a photocopy is probably fine. Yeah, I'm going to take one more question from from this brother way in the back who didn't ask one yet. You have to speak up a little bit, sir. Sorry. That's me, sorry. If you're in the school in the parking lot? Okay, so first of all, if you're in the school, it's in the playground at the school, right? The school playground, if you're there during school hours, it's very unlikely that ICE is going to encounter you because your school's going to have that place locked down. Like your mom can't even get into the school without going to the office and getting permission to go to the school. So they're not letting ICE into the school. So that's not something you have to worry about. And then I'm going to take this question from this gentleman, and then we're going to be all finished today, inshallah. 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 If you have a specific immigration question, I'm going to ask you probably to call our office if it's about your specific case. Okay. Thank you. Yes, you never have to answer any questions about your immigration, like how you came here, when you came here, whether you were born here. You don't. If you are encountered by immigration on the street, if you are at like an interview or something like that, you have to answer. But if you're encountered by ICE or immigration officers on the street, you never have to answer those questions. I mean, like it happens. Like it happens. Like if you are detained unlawfully and you've asserted your rights and you haven't signed any papers without your attorney being present, then it's not difficult to get you released. You have to give your name. Everybody has to identify their name, their biographical information, but you don't have to give any other information. And you can say, I'm not going to answer questions. All right. We're gonna wrap up. We're gonna wrap up, inshallah. We're gonna wrap up, inshallah, and then if I'll be here for like another 2 or 3 minutes. We can answer. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes. So his question is more about schools, and he said if they don't let you pray, that is a violation of your civil rights, and that is something that CARE handles on a daily basis. Sister Subia actually handles that. If we can get it resolved without legal action, that's her job. So yes. And if you can't pray or if you have a problem fasting for Ramadan, then you can definitely call our office, and that's something we can take care of. So inshallah, jazakallah khair for everybody for coming. I'll stay around for like another couple minutes because it is late and I know other people want to go. So assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Amy and Sister Subia. Thank you so much. It was a very beneficial event. And in future, if the community wants to reach you or if they have any questions, I guess the best place is to email you. Email or call the CARE office. There was a slide with the email and phone number. I hope everyone took a picture. So once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Really, always an honor. Thank you so much. Okay, Jazakallah khair everyone for coming. Inshallah, we hope to see you in our future events. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.